Long ago, we looked upon a foreboding sky. The memory of the star that threatened all burns eternal in our hearts. In its wake came an age of silence. Yet with each fond remembrance we knew those encountered were not forgotten, that someday we would see them again. Perhaps it was no more than wishful thinking, but after the long calm, there are now beginnings of a stir. The reunion at hand may bring joy, it may bring fear, but let us embrace whatever it brings, for they are coming back. At last, the promise has been made. Throughout the marketing of Final Fantasy VII Remake, it was evident that Sephiroth was going to be more prevalent in the Midgar section of the game than in the original. It's been 23 years now since the original Final Fantasy VII released. Everyone who knows video games knows who Sephiroth is. Everyone knows the major spoilers to the game, and that just comes with time. So, it makes sense that Square-Enix would assume that the players know who Sephiroth is, and the game was told to be a remake of the events up to the party's escape from Midgar, so they chose to portray Sephiroth as a character who's evil for the sake of evil, like that of Darth Vader in Episode 4 compared to his appearance in Episode 5, with Sephiroth's motivations to be explored in the next installment. Sephiroth isn't in the Midgar section of the game, at least physically. You only hear mentions of how he was a great war hero, and then you see his Masamune and President Shinra's back, and that was pretty much it. But with all this added Sephiroth in Remake, the question can be asked, what exactly is he up to, and how do these whispers of fate tie into all of this? What is Sephiroth's endgame in Final Fantasy VII Remake? Sephiroth never appears physically in Remake, which is exactly how he appears throughout the original game, where he is just apparitions on clones with Genova cells or visions in Cloud Strike's mind. But in Remake, it's quite obvious that Sephiroth appears more often, and it makes sense. You can't have the first part of a series of games where the main villain doesn't even appear. You need that threat present. So Sephiroth appears to Cloud long before he's supposed to, right after the bombing of Mako Reactor 1 in Chapter 2. And this vision causes Cloud to walk down an alley, engulfed in flames, resembling the Nibelheim incident. Now the Nibelheim incident is the event that left Cloud so scarred and caused all of his breakdowns and headaches in the original. And his account isn't even the true account because of the trauma left upon him. But in Remake, Sephiroth knows Cloud's account and torments him with this knowledge he didn't have in the original. After seeing visions of the incident, Cloud follows a vision of Sephiroth, who after stopping in an alley, goes on to have this exchange with him.
You're not real. You're dead.
I am.
I killed you with my own...
Oh, you need not remind me. It was the crowning moment of our time together. But that was then, and this is now. I have a favor to ask. Our beloved planet is dying. Slowly. Silently. Painfully. Can you bear to see the planet suffer? Cloud. Were the planet to die, so many things would be lost. Your hometown that burns so bright. The sound of her voice, pleading beneath his bury. The shiver of her flesh, yielding to cold steel. That which binds us together would be no more, and I would be loath to live in such a world, which is why I must ask you this one favor. Don't worry. It's a simple thing. Run, Cloud. Run away. You have to leave. You have to live.
You bastard!
Good, Cloud. Very good. Hold on to that hatred.
Now, all of this is just a complete and utter distraction, a filibuster, if you will. And I'll come back to that because it seems that every time Sephiroth shows up in Remake, it's to do something different from the original game, or to change things from the original. Now, this is only the first example where Sephiroth appears to meddle, but there's always something there to put the story back on track. The Whispers of Fate. Throughout the marketing of Remake, before we all knew the true ending of the game, we were expecting it to be a faithful yet expanded retelling. We were all concerned about the presence of these knockoff Dementors. It was a new addition, and I was concerned because, as shown in the trailers, Cloud doesn't run into Aerith on happenstance, like in the original. His attention is drawn her way because of them. And then, when the game came out, throughout the first 17 chapters, they were a nuisance. They literally blocked me from gathering materia in the church. They were aggressive and they didn't mesh well with the game as a whole, but they were also changing things to the story. Now with Sephiroth, he was changing things and no one batted an eye, because it was cool. It was cool to see Sephiroth doing Sephiroth things again, but the ghosts weren't cool, so they didn't mesh well. And I believe that this was purposeful by the storytellers and the developers. When Red 13 gives the explanation of the Whispers in Shinra HQ, he describes them as harbingers of fate, as protectors of the timeline. And during the battle with the Harbinger in Chapter 18, when the party receives a vision of the ending of the original game, Red 13 explains to them that that they saw is a glimpse of tomorrow if we fail here today, thereby suggesting that the ending we've known for 23 years is the bad ending, at least from what the party knows. We know that the planet is a living being. It protects itself. When Meteor hits the planet at the climax of the original game, it reacts. It combats it. The life stream healed the planet, and 2,000 years ago, it created the weapons to protect itself from the virus that is Genova. And because the ending of the original game, an ending where there are no more humans alive to bleed the planet dry of Mako, it would be a bad ending, of course, for the party, for humanity, but it may not be the bad ending for the planet, per se. So why wouldn't the planet have the defenses against alterations to the timeline? Wouldn't the planet want the story to end where there are no more threats against itself? These countermeasures with no limit of time and space, as shown that these whispers surrounding Midgar as the party is escaping, are there when Zack is ambushed in the flashback. And these countermeasures are the Whispers, of course. Given with what I said about Aerith and Cloud's initial meeting as an example, these Whispers are interfering with the plot of Remake to ensure that the timeline of the original remains intact. Sephiroth distracted Cloud by taking him down an alleyway, and after this traumatic vision, Cloud just keeps walking down the street. He doesn't think to turn down Loveless. Yet something catches his eye. Aerith at the corner, waving her arms about like she's in trouble, immediately grabbing Cloud's attention. Aerith, of course, is frightened by the Whispers. If it wasn't for them, Cloud would have never met Aerith, and the story would be drastically different from the original game. The Whispers were there to make sure that, however aggressive their tactics may be, the original timeline is intact. Everything Sephiroth does is in opposition to these Whispers, even leading the party to fight them so that they don't let fate bound them. It seems obvious that Sephiroth knows about these Whispers, and now this coming claim may seem impossible, but trust me, when I first heard it I thought it was insane as well. But then I thought about it, and it makes sense. Sephiroth is from the future. This is a Sephiroth post-Advent Children, who has, through Jenova, come back to change the flow of the timeline. Think about it. He knows what events play a pivotal role in Cloud's story, meeting Aerith on the Sector 8 plate, going on the Mako Reactor 5 bombing mission. He attempts to change these events so that what was his history, his failure at the end of both the original game and Advent Children, is no longer inevitable. He guides the party to the singularity and invites them to challenge their fate, because if they challenge theirs, his will also be challenged. Now there's empirical evidence to support this, of course, as during his boss fight at the end of the game, he spouts his infamous one wing, something that in the original compilation of Final Fantasy VII, he never does, except during the events of Advent Children. When you take into account Sephiroth's motivations in Advent Children, he puts it very clearly in the now famous line, "I will never be a memory." He will live on, in one way or another, but not as a memory, and not in that timeline. This Sephiroth, through Jenova cells, or something I'm sure will be explained in future installments, went back in time to ensure his survival, and, if his aspirations were greater, his victory. Because at the time when Remake is taking place, the physical body of Sephiroth is still crystallized in the northern crater, and he only appears through visions and clones because of the cellular nature of Jenova. Being the son of Jenova, Sephiroth can manifest his form upon what are called Sephiroth clones, which are humans injected with Jenova cells. Everything injected with them are connected, which leads to Hojo's correct theory about reunion. Cloud Strife himself was injected with Jenova cells during his tenure in the Shinra Mansion after the Nibelheim incident, which explains why he is so affected by Sephiroth throughout the original game and in Remake. And with Sephiroth from the future, it explains why Cloud is given visions of the future, or at least the future of the original timeline. The main vision being that of Aerith's death. Sephiroth is taunting Cloud with a horrific vision, thus giving him more and more reasoning to challenge his fate. As Aerith says at Destiny's Crossroads, everything about Sephiroth is wrong. He isn't meant to be here, and he knows more than he should at this point in time. He is wrong. There was one more critical point of evidence that takes this up to the next level, and also tying in more of the Final Fantasy VII compilation. The true identities of the Harbinger of Fate and its three protectors, Whisper Rubrum, Verdi, and Crokeo. As it says in their flavor text, they are manifestations of beings here to protect the future that gave birth to them. Now you've probably seen IGN's video discussing how they fight with a sword, a gun, and fists, so therefore they are a future version of Cloud, Barret, and Tifa, respectively. But Whisper Rubrum has a short sword in his left hand, not a massive buster sword. It's not Cloud. Whisper Crokeo has two handguns, not a massive gun arm. And Whisper Verdi doesn't have two gloves, only one. They are not the future manifestations of Cloud, Barret, and Tifa. They are the manifestations of the Advent Children, Kadaj, Laz, and Yazoo. There is so much backing this claim up. Kadaj fights using fire magic and a short sword in his left hand. He becomes Whisper Rubrum. Laz uses lightning magic and a large glove on his right hand. He becomes Whisper Verdi. Yazoo uses wind magic and fights with two guns. He becomes Whisper Crokeo. In Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, who do the remnants of Sephiroth summon to fight for them? None other than Bahamut. Now in Remake, who do the Whispers merge and form after their defeat by the party? Bahamut. Now this isn't just coincidental, because the name of the main Whisper is Whisper Harbinger. Now in the film Advent Children, Vincent Valentine calls Sephiroth Heaven's Dark Harbinger. Sephiroth seems to have something to do with the actions of these Whispers, or at least Jenova, because if the protectors of the planet are taking the names of the biggest threat to it, something is wrong. Perhaps Jenova did more damage to the planet 2,000 years ago than originally thought. But why exactly would Sephiroth want to challenge what would appear to be a manifestation of his future self? I believe this will be answered in the coming entries of Remake's story. Since there are no conclusive evidence surrounding this topic, I can only assume that the Advent Children will appear again, just in a different form, at least after the apparent destruction of the Whispers at the hand of the party. The opening movie of Remake is strikingly different from that of the original, with all the added shots of the upper plates of Midgar to show off more of the planet and the effect Shinra has on it. But when you directly compare the shots that are remade from the original, the iconic shot of Aerith staring into the Mako in the alleyway has something different about it. In the original, she just walks out of the alleyway onto Loveless Street, but in Remake, she is startled by something down the alley and runs out to be knocked down on the sidewalk. What startled her so? And I think this could be answered musically, as something was added to the prelude to the game, something iconic, yet it took me a few listens to make sure it was there. Throughout the opening movie, there are the chords and Latin lyrics of One Winged Angel, which of course is Sephiroth's battle theme. Now, Sephiroth's theme is not at all present at this point of the original game, and I believe that this is hinting that something is already wrong from the beginning of the game. Now this would answer the previous question. Aerith hears Sephiroth. She knows that he's there, but how would she know? One of the final shots of the original game, after Holy is summoned to stop Meteor, is a vision of Aerith closing her eyes. Now the opening shot of Remake, she's opening them. She does not open her eyes at the beginning of the original, so why else would they change something seemingly so insignificant, yet only to suggest that Aerith knows what has happened in the original game, to give a line of continuity by the closing and the opening of the eyes, that she, like Sephiroth, knows the events of the original game. Aerith seems to act weird in certain situations. Without Cloud telling her that he was a soldier, she knows, and knows that he is also a merc. She tries to cover it up by saying she guessed from his Buster Sword. And when Aerith predicts exactly what Cloud would do in a situation, he says, "Quit acting like you know me." She does. Before Tifa asks Aerith to rescue Marlene, she just guesses it and runs off to save her. Tifa even looks surprised at this, but just accepts it as Marlene's in danger. And when she first meets Cloud, she says that the flower she gives him symbolizes a reunion, and acts like she already knows who he is. Because she does, he just doesn't know her yet, and she's trying to keep the timeline on track. There are a great many examples of these, and there's an excellent post on the Remake subreddit by user DBClick, compiling over 50 pieces of evidence backing this up, including references that Aerith knows that she is destined to die at the hands of Sephiroth. Aerith knows what is going to happen to the party, and by extent, her death at the hands of Sephiroth. She has been sent back, or at least received the memories of the original Aerith by the planet. She's an ambassador, but when she sees Sephiroth, it appears that her plan of keeping the timeline intact changes. When the party is at Destiny's crossroads, Aerith gives the party this information.
This is the point of no return. Destiny's crossroads.
Then why did you stop me?
I'm not really sure.
What will we find on the other side?
Freedom. Boundless, terrifying freedom. Like a great, never-ending sky. What you heard just now were the voices of the planet. Those born into this world, who lived and who died, who returned, are howling in pain.
Because of him, Sephiroth?
Their words, they don't reach him. All these moments and memories, precious and fleeting, they're like rain rolling off his back. And when they're gone, he won't cry or shout or anything. He'd tell you that he only cares about the planet, that he'd do everything in his power to protect and preserve it. But this isn't the way it's supposed to be. There's no greater threat to the planet than him. Sephiroth has to be stopped. He has to be. And that's why I'm asking you to help me. I know that together we can do this. But if we do, we'll be changing more than fate itself. If we succeed, if we win, we'll be changing ourselves. I guess maybe that's why I hesitated.
You worry too much. I'm not some princess who needs to be coddled. Shit.
Aerith knows that the only way to combat this virus to the planet, Sephiroth, is to challenge fate itself, and it seems to go against the will of the planet. Why she seems to go against it, I do not know, but I hope this will be answered in future installments. But as of now, the conflict of the coming games will be between those blessed with premonition, Aerith and Sephiroth. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII ends with Zack Fair, Soldier First Class, in Cloud Strife being ambushed by Shinra troops, and Zack is shot and killed, creating the Cloud Strife we see in both Final Fantasy VII and Remake. Now that's a different story, but Remake shows a different version of these events. In a shot-for-shot remake of the Crisis Core cutscene, the Whispers of Fate are shown to be flying around, both around the Shinra troops and in the dome around Midgar, the same dome they're in while the party's escaping in the future. And when the Whispers are defeated by the party in the future, they are also defeated in the past. These Whispers exist beyond time. But then, as the Whispers are destroyed, you see a new cutscene, one where instead of Zack being killed, he survives, and takes Cloud to Midgar like he originally planned. This of course is not how it originally went down, creating a new timeline. Also Stamp, the propaganda dog used by Shinra, is a completely different breed and wearing a different hat than which is so prevalently shown throughout the rest of the game. So now there are 3 timelines, the original timeline, this remake, and this new one where Zack survives. And one can only assume where this is going. Now this may sound like conspiracy theory talk, but given everything I've said, I feel like this describes this whole essay. When Aerith is killed, the storytellers are going to make something that struck us all 23 years ago hit so much harder, by not just having Cloud Strife lose her, but also Zack Fair, her first love. Given the scene where Aerith and Zack walk past each other in separate timelines yet recognize each other, gives this some validity. This may just be where Remake is going. One of the most confusing sections of the whole game is Cloud's visit at the edge of creation with Sephiroth. Of course, quite obviously, it is the final showdown from the original game, down to the stances of the two as they face each other, the cinematography and quick cuts, all identical to the original game, something I definitely didn't think we would see at least until the actual end of this remake. As said previously, this remake can change everything. Now I'm going to recount the scene and dissect my interpretation of what was meant to be the end, and what it means for this new series of events.
Careful now. That which lies ahead does not yet exist. Our world will become a part of it one day, but I will not end. Nor will I have you end.
This is...
the edge of creation. Cloud, lend me your strength. Let us defy destiny together.
Never.
Not yet. Seven seconds till the end. Time enough for you, perhaps. But what will you do with it? Let's see.
So, let's go through this line by line just to make it easier for me.
Careful now. That which lies ahead does not yet exist. Our world will become a part of it one day, but I will not end. Nor will I have you end.
This is...
the edge of creation.
Now from this here, Sephiroth seems to be talking about their final encounter, something which lies ahead but does not yet exist. But then he starts talking about what the world will become, and I feel Sephiroth himself answers that. Their world will become a part of the edge of creation. It will pass away, and Sephiroth will not pass away with it. He will endure, and he still needs Cloud. Sephiroth is still in the northern crater, and he needs Cloud to give him the black materia to summon a meteor. But this Sephiroth knows his past mistakes, and seems to be taking precautions.
Cloud, lend me your strength. Let us defy destiny together.
Sephiroth is reaching out his hand to Cloud, as he knows that Cloud is the one who destroys him in the original timeline. A timeline he is desperately trying to distance himself from. So why not let Cloud work with him rather than against, thus removing Sephiroth's greatest threat entirely. And now the big one.
7 seconds till the end. Time enough for you, perhaps. But what will you do with it? Let's see.
There are two possibilities of what Sephiroth is referring to. The in-game flavor text describes the scenario as Sephiroth giving Cloud a vision of 7 seconds till the end of the world, and as the explanation given by an already cryptic game, the internet has done its best to figure out another meaning. In the original game, it takes Sephiroth 7 seconds exactly to jump down and plunge his Masamune into Aerith. And the music playing at the edge of creation includes melodies from the City of the Ancients theme, the place where Aerith dies. It is possible that the 7 seconds Sephiroth is referring to is that of Aerith's death, or the 7 seconds before a meteor impacts the planet. All that matters is that Sephiroth is doing what he does best, taunt Cloud. And as he said in Advent Children,
I've thought of a wonderful present for you. Shall I give you despair? Is this the pain you felt before, Cloud? Let me remind you, this time you won't forget. Tell me what you cherish most. Give me the pleasure of taking it away.
Sephiroth may not have given that Cloud despair, may not have taken what that Cloud cherished most, but this Cloud may just taste Sephiroth's wrath. So, given everything I've said thus far, let's draft up a timeline of what I'm going to call the expanded Final Fantasy VII compilation, to show the path to Final Fantasy VII Remake and its sequel, or whatever Square and No More decide to call it. To start, here's a timeline of the original compilation, starting with Crisis Core, then FF7, which is continued with Advent Children, and then Dirge of Cerberus, which we don't really need to pay attention to, so I'm just going to remove it, and then we have Remake in its own little bubble. Let's put these games into a coherent story. Sephiroth's story. As said in this essay, he returns to change his fate. The story of his fall at Nibelheim, his defeat at the hands of Cloud Strife, and now his return. To start this timeline, I removed Remake from the equation momentarily, because it takes place on a different line. Then I drew the arrow from which Sephiroth returns and where he is returning from. And this caused the event at Destiny's Crossroads, which branched Remake into a split in the timeline, similar to that of Back to the Future Part 2, or the Kelvin timeline of Star Trek, a branch where Sephiroth is remaking the timeline. And this also creates the branch where it appears Zack survived. This is the timeline of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and the compilation remade. One of the lingering questions I've mentioned thus far but haven't fully gone into is how exactly does a post-Advent Children Sephiroth return to the past? And after much research, I believe I found a clear conclusion to this problem, and it's found in the small chapters in the book On the Way to a Smile by Nojima, one of the writers of the original Final Fantasy VII. This book features stories about several characters and what they are doing between the original game and Advent Children, and at the end of each chapter is a smaller chapter. They are either called Livestream Black or Livestream White. These are focused on Sephiroth and Aerith respectively, and what they are doing in the livestream before Advent Children. Livestream Black, which is about Sephiroth, appears to hold some answers to exactly how Sephiroth manifested his form to a past version of Cloud. The man could sense the livestream trying to erode his spirit, the memories of his former experiences, thoughts, and emotions. If he allowed himself to be taken into the current, the being he once was would soon disseminate and disappear amongst the spirit energies cycling around the planet. The man thought this unacceptable. The planet was to be his to rule, and to be a part of that system would be nothing short of defeat. The man sensed a large flux in the livestream, a sign of another, different defeat. When the livestream erupted onto the surface of the planet, the man thought that Cloud was no doubt certain of his victory. Cloud was the one who had twice sent the man into the livestream. The man knew that if one could hold on to some core of their spirit, then one could remain a separate entity, independent from the planet's systems. Cloud. The man decided to make Cloud that core, and he wanted to let Cloud know of that. I'm still thinking of you, and I'll show you the proof of that as well. When the livestream erupted onto the surface of the planet, the man had already surrendered his inconsequential memories to the planet. Memories from when he was a boy, of his few friends, of the battles when he was still unaware, of his life in bygone days. All of these became encased around Meteor, and finally receded. At the same time, the core of his spirit and those memories deeply related to it moved from torrent to torrent, and traveled around the land from city to city. When the people who were trying to escape, or those left unable to do anything but stand still, were enveloped by those streams, he decided to leave them with his stigma. If Cloud noticed that stigma, the man was certain that he would never disappear. As long as Cloud remembers me, I can continue to exist. Within the livestream and on the surface, Even if my spirit disseminates, even if just one fragment of memory courses around the planet, in the end, I can count on Cloud's consciousness to bring me back, the man thought. Despite mankind's troubles, life on the planet had returned to normal. The man became aware of the increase in spirits. They could be called the darkness of the heart, melding with the life stream. He cherished that lingering darkness, even more so when he considered that the stigma he had left on the surface was what created it. He thought that he could possibly enjoy himself with that, filling the life stream with this darkness. The man hid himself within the life on the planet and traveled around the world, branding even more people with his stigma. On the surface, there were many people who no longer had their normal lives, and at the man's temptation, the dark parts of their hearts grew even larger. Soon the man thought to himself, I want Cloud to know this is my doing. I want the humans to know this is my doing. For that, he needed a body. There were things he wanted to say in his own voice, things he wanted to shatter by his own hand. He had decided he would use his mother's power. With a fragment of mother's body, I too can get a body again, the man thought. And so firstly, he tried to manifest on the surface as just a spirit, but his attempt failed. He had already returned the memories of his own appearance to the planet, and so he was not able to produce an image of himself. So, the man found memories of a suitable appearance from the life stream, and with that form produced an image. It was the form of a boy. Soon the man remembered that being on the surface was incomparably more limited to the freedom of being a spirit. He created 2 more agents to do his work. These 3 were separate entities, and at the same time he himself. These 3, created by the strength of the man's will and detached from the system of the planet, were both at once part of reality and monsters out of fantasy. The man thought of the future. As my servants are looking for Mother, if they came across someone who knows me, then from that spirit I can learn of who I once was, and with Mother's further assistance, I can become fully real. Even if there's something lacking, it doesn't matter. Cloud will make me complete. That will be the beginning, the man thought. Cloud is the key. The major reveal within these chapters is that Cloud is the key, like a Horcrux for Sephiroth. He attached his very being, his hatred, upon Cloud, so that as long as Cloud remembers him, Sephiroth can return. Sephiroth isn't a corporeal being, but a mimetic legacy, cellular. So if there is only one bit of his spirit circling the planet and yet Cloud remembers him, Sephiroth can be brought back to life. Now Sephiroth attempted multiple times to return to the surface, as I read. The first was a failure, but resulted with Geostigma, the virus that plagues the planet and Advent children, and created resentment towards the planet and the lifestream, so it was successful in only that regard. The second attempt to leave the lifestream was successful, but flawed, as Sephiroth created the Advent children I spoke of earlier, Gadaj, Laz, and Yazoo, and this resulted in Cloud being the anchor for Gadaj to lend Sephiroth his body, so he can fully manifest on the surface during the climax of Advent Children. Yet he is still defeated by Cloud in the end, and I believe he realized something, that the Whispers of Fate and the Arbiters of the planet exist beyond time. It appears that Sephiroth had fixated himself upon Cloud so drastically that he can manifest his form even in the past. And that is my theory as to how Sephiroth returned to the past to change the timeline. But he is only a mimetic being, not corporeal. He couldn't change the timeline by himself, so he toyed with, he taunted Cloud, all to get him and the party in the place he needed them to be, physically and emotionally, to want to change their destiny. The only thing is, they didn't just change their destiny, they changed his. Cloud, Aerith, Tifa, Barret, and Red 13 seem to be going down an unknown path, unknown to all of them, even us, the players. This remake isn't just a remake of the game graphically and gameplay-wise, but one of the story too, and it's been there all along. From the initial reveal back in 2015, the trailers have hinted at this, we just didn't notice. Now I don't know about you, but I loved every second of Final Fantasy VII Remake, including the ending, and in the meantime, as we all wait for the next installment, when we theorize about what it all means and how it's going to play into the next game, I can say without a doubt that I have never seen this kind of reaction to a video game. This feels like we're all collectively walking out of the movie theater from seeing Fellowship of the Ring or Avengers Infinity War. We're all so anxious to know what happens next, and I love it. And now that we know that we aren't getting a beat-for-beat retelling of the original game, the storytellers have given us mystery again. And like the final screen said, the unknown journey will continue.